State Board of Elections here on April 5th. I'm Peter Kosinski. To my right is Commissioner Doug Kellner. To his right is Commissioner Andy Spano, and to my left, Commissioner Greg Peterson. We have before us to begin the minutes of our meeting of March 1, 2018. I would entertain a motion to adopt. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? They're adopted. And we will now move on to unit updates. And our first unit is Executive Unit, Bob Brem and Todd Valentine.
Yeah, as you may have heard, the state budget was adopted. Obviously, our budget was adopted, and included in that, and Bob will go into more details on this, was the authorization to spend the substantial federal money that we're anticipating to get to help us develop this cybersecurity, as well as a small piece of state money to augment that effort as well. And what we would be expected coming back to, we've been working on developing a plan for months at this point in time. And we'll go into detail in the future, but basically it's to assess the situation for the counties, provide remediation for any issues that they have, monitor their ongoing operations, and then have some kind of a response capability when something does go wrong, because, you know, things do happen. So those are the four pieces of the puzzle that we're putting together. And we've been consulting with the State Office for Technology, as well as our own State Department of Homeland Security Center representative has been at the meetings, as well as the Governor's Cybersecurity Advisory Task Force has been part of that. So we've had discussions, and now we've actually included the Division of Budget has been part of this. Is for working on the plan. And again, as the federal money, just to remind you very quickly, and Bob can go into details, is that will require, when we go to the point where we're making the expenditure, the board will have to approve those because it's part of the existing, it goes into our HAVA account. So we will have a more detailed plan for you at the next board meeting. A small piece that was also included was an additional of Supreme Court judges. That doesn't direct us effectively, except for those are offices that we oversee that will be on the ballot this fall. We assume at some point that the Office of Court Administration will certify those vacancies to us, but we know in statute that that's coming up to occur. And that they added judges in the 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, and 13th judicial districts. And a more troubling piece of the puzzle that came out late was the piece regarding digital advertisements and capturing those. It puts a substantial burden on the state board to define what it means. It left an unusual term for online platform, which requires us to define it and give some very broad parameters as to what to include in that, which will be problematic, and their counsel's office has been meeting to try to come up with that. But it also puts a very strict timeline that we're supposed to at least have regulations in play within 120 days for those independent expenditure committees that engage in what they call digital ads to be able to provide to us copies of those ads when they make their weekly or sometimes 24-hour reports as they get closer to an election. But it also puts a burden on whoever the online platform is to have a copy of the registration document that the Independent Expenditure Committee has. So that while legally that's being a challenge, getting the regulations together to get that done is one aspect of it, but also adding to our database to collect those ads, because while we collect them now, we don't collect them until the end of the process in the 27-day post-election filing. This would increase that to a level that we were not quite prepared to do at this point. And since we're in a critical phase of developing...
Todd, explain that to me a little bit. It'll increase our what? Frequency with which they have to make those filings?
The frequency of those filings on a, weekly, and then in some cases a 24-hour period. So it means having the database ready and able to accept them and then make them available publicly. Because right now when the ads come in, they're available publicly, but they're not posted online because of the nature that we get a lot of political ads. They don't lend themselves to being posted online. They're often printed on T-shirts, coffee mugs, hard items that can't really be posted. So if people want copies, they can come and get them. They're available, but not they're not available online just because of the nature of them. Because these are digital ads, the statute requires them to be posted presumably on our website. It's not specific as to the location of that, but presumably. So we would have to have an accessible format of whatever is posted, because we still have to meet our accessibility requirements for anything that's posted on our website. And so we'll have to put into our regulations, here's the format you need to provide it to us in order for us to be able to post it electronically. That's not necessarily the way that they submit the ads. It's going to be a significant challenge. I'll be honest, the deadlines are a little unreasonable. Certainly, that was made aware of, they're aware of that, but, they want it in time for this election. And you'll hear more complaining from the staff about that as we go forward, but we're going to do the best that we can, but I can't guarantee those tight time frames, and at this point, I don't know what it's going to look like.
But Todd, isn't the point then to at least get emergency regulations in place, put them out for public comment, and then perhaps the public comments will give us additional resources in order to prepare the permanent regulations?
Oh, no, definitely, that's what we're shooting for, is to get a regulation, something to you by the next board meeting, because this just happened last week, so we can't just write it in a week. They're good, but that's a little unreasonable. But that would be our goal, to do that. But when you talk about the resources, that is also what's missing. There was no additional funding to help augment our FIDA system. We didn't get any additional dollars to do that, and that is, again, we're in a strategic phase of that, and this obviously would be some change to that program.
We have $20 million of HAVA money that.
Well, it's a good question whether it could be used to that, because
Yeah.
it's not for this. These would clearly not be applicable to a federal election. So whether that would be a permissible expense by the EAC, we don't know yet. And again, Bob can go into this. We're expected to get a quick briefing on the expenditures this afternoon, but that's something we would have to raise. Maybe pieces of it could be used if it's ancillary to the expenditure, and that is a reason that's been acceptable to them in the past. But again, this is not for federal election, purely not for federal election.
And it's not part of the actual voting system, it's more of the finance disclosure system.
So that's where that lack of funding could be a problem.
So we should expect to see something at the next meeting to try to implement this?
That's what we're expecting, yes.
Okay, and I guess in the, Bill, your section is going to have to be...
Right,
You're going to talk about this during your segment?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll add what I can to it, but it's pretty descriptive.
Yeah, he does.
Okay.
And then,
Actually, I think it's more at the council's level yet. From our perspective, council's meeting to make sure they give us the business rules and then meet with Bill. So I think it's a little early for Bill to comment because it's still at the council level. And then they will meet with Bill to make sure that he understands what they think the business rules are so he can start designing a response. So I think Bill's a little too early yet. With regard to the federal money, it was a surprise to all of us that there was ever a discussion of more federal money. It kind of came out at the last minute. We did succeed in getting information. It kept modifying as we went as to what the level of funding could be, but to also get the authorization to at least receive this federal money and to spend. It's about $20 million. It's a little under $19.5 million of federal money, which requires a 5% match, which is just under $1 million. Luckily, when we modified the state HAVA plan the last time we received federal money in 2009, it's a lot of work to modify the plan. We anticipated if Help America Vote Act was fully funded to the $3.6 billion level that they authorized originally. So when we modified the plan in 2009, we put in there the potential that we could get additional federal funds and how we would treat them. So we don't have to amend our state plan, at least I don't believe so. We're going to confirm that later this afternoon. So that at least puts us at the head of being able to receive the money and get ready to spend it. on items. Certainly security-related programs, they weren't identified quite the same in 2009 or 2002 when the law was first passed, but certainly the authorization in the federal budget allows it to be used for security-related purposes. So implementing our state, the cybersecurity plan that we had been working on anyway, most of that, if not all of that, would qualify for federal funds in that expenditure. So the budget did specifically reference the 5% match as the state $5 million that is in the budget for cybersecurity specifically identifies it's a plan to be approved by the commissioners, and then that will, to the extent we need $1 million of that $5 million, will count towards the state's 5% match for the federal money. So we believe we have the match covered. It's just a matter of when the Federal Election Assistance Commission gives us the login in order to apply for the money. So if we don't have to amend the plan, we already have the 5% match covered, even though the federal law gives states until next year to come up with a 5% match, because it's in many states, it's mid-budget. They have to have a period of time to actually come up with a 5% match and put it in their state budget. We should be able to have the money right away. The federal law said it needs to be available to the states within 45 days of being enacted, and tomorrow's day 14. So we have seen a pretty quick turnaround from the Federal Election Assistance Commission. They sent us a letter identifying the amount of money, and they have a call with all the states this afternoon to do a Q&A on how to access that money. So we will spend it with your vote of authorization, same as we have all other federal HAVA money, and we hope to have a plan to you. I don't know that we'd have a plan to spend all of it, but certainly a plan to get started on the higher priorities of that implementation.
So you're expecting cybersecurity to be the primary use of money?
Well, our budget ask was $15 million already. We have 5 at the state level, so it's a substantial number of that. If we used it, we could use it for that purpose. So I think at least a good portion of it would be part of what we.
And it's not just spending on us, it's also supporting the counties. They'll be benefiting from it as well, because there's certain activities in order to make sure that it's done in a uniform manner, and knowing that and not making the counties pay for it, we should be able to help them. Risk assessments, for example. If we're looking at monitoring services, that the state would pay for that, and then this way we benefit from it, but so would the counties as well. But yet they shouldn't have to bear that burden.
New voting systems? Are those eligible?
Certainly, the existing money would allow, the existing authorization would allow voting systems. The state, the authorization of the budget gives the money to the State Board of Elections. If you were to allocate it to the counties, we would just have to come up with a way. There's no allocation formula in there. But that doesn't mean we couldn't.
So it's my understanding that we could use the money for new voting system equipment or other, if we wanted to.
Okay.
But that would be a determination.
No, I understand. I'm just trying to understand what it's what's even eligible.
The language in the federal bill keeps all of the pre-HAVA eligibility. Anything you could buy before, you could buy now.
Okay.
It expanded to make clear you could hire people to do cybersecurity. You could hire people. You could hire contractors. You could do security-related things with the money to make elections secure. I don't know that it wasn't identified in the earlier rounds of HAVA, but it clearly is identified now in the current version.
And there are advocates who are saying that money should be used for audit process, which would be eligible too.
Okay. But you're going to bring us a plan then for the use of the money?
At least to get started.
At the next meeting, is that
Yes.
your expectation?
Yeah.
Okay. At least part of the money?
Yes.
Not necessarily all of it?
Correct.
Okay. Anything else that you guys have to report on?
We had the death in the 25th Congressional District for Louise Slaughter, so we certified that vacancy. I don't remember the day. I'm sure operations will probably have the date.
There's no,
Like Good
there's no,
Friday.
is there a special that's been called there, or no?
There has not been yet a special. In the 46th Senate Assembly District, we just received on the 3rd of April the resignation from Assemblywoman Pamela Harris, and we certified that vacancy also. The vacancy was effective April 2, so the Public Officers Law does not provide for a special election unless an extraordinary session of the legislature is called for. So those are the two vacancies that don't have a special. We have the 11 that are vacant to have a special on April 24th that we are working towards.
Right. Okay. Anything else?
No.
Okay. Any questions? All right, then we'll move on to council. Brian Quayle and Kim Galvin.
Thank you, Commissioner. I don't know if we talked about this last time, but the September state and local primary was moved from September 11th to September 13th. That's just a FYI. With regard to the regulations, our post-election audit regs that you voted on will be published on April 11th. The regulations on the candidate websites will be published on April 11th. And the special federal voter regulations became fully effective on March 28th. We've done the normal work of the unit, including, the compliance reviews, filling foils and subpoena requests, calls, etc. There's been an increase in some committee terminations post-election in the local year. We've attended the Capus Fides Nice Voter meetings. We also had a set of specific objections to work to get us back into the flow of that in the 102nd Assembly District that you'll be voting on later. With regard to litigation notes, a decision was handed down last week on both LLC cases, maintaining the status quo there. And ESON, which is the website availability case, the trial is set for May. We're still in negotiations. And Merced, oral arguments were held. Merced is whether or not an out-of-state person can be a witness to an independent nominating petition. Oral argument was held on March 29th on competing motions for summary judgment. What is important here, or could potentially be, is that decision could fall somewhere in the middle of our independent nominating petition periods.
Which begins when?
June 19th, I believe, for the federal.
Is it? Oh yeah, I was thinking August for the other ones. Or
So the federal's in June.
I believe so, yes.
And this would impact federal offices as well as state and
Potentially.
local.
Potentially,
All
all of
offices in the
them,
state.
yeah.
All
All of
independent
them.
nominations.
Feds go first because of our calendar.
Yep. Okay.
There was also litigation of note that we were tangentially involved in regarding the Independence Party authorization in the 37th Senate District. That's the upcoming special. That went up on appeal, and the appellate division last week upheld the lower court determination that the independence authorization was invalid. I was going to talk about the regulation regarding the ads and the IE committees, but I think Todd did a nice job on that, other than the fact that I will repeat again, if I missed him saying it, that the State Board of Elections has been tasked with defining online platform for creating a definition that captures these entities for this new regulation, which is interesting to me, who has difficulty signing into my cell phone on numerous occasions. But we are anticipating there will be a great deal of interest in our definition, and many people have already reached out to us asking to come sit with us to talk about that specific issue. So I wouldn't be surprised if the commissioners also received calls from people that may or may not want to describe what they feel should be or should not be covered in the bill.
So if I'm an independent committee then, and I put an ad up on YouTube, promoting a candidate, I then have to submit that to the board here as well,
Yes,
within a certain time period?
Yes.
yes,
So
And then we have to post that
yes.
video on,
Well, we have to post whatever it is that we require them to post. It's unclear whether or not it requires the digital advertisement itself to be posted, or in certain circumstances, just the transcript of the ad. We were working through this in a meeting yesterday, and there's a lot of logistics that need to be.
Could this have the effect of us becoming the new YouTube?
Hopefully not.
Where-
Hopefully nobody's that
Where
interested.
every ad that gets posted is
Well-
now linked in our website?
Well, it's interesting because there are 79, I believe, is the number. Is that the number?
that is correct. Yeah.
Independent expenditure committees currently filed. So basically, the whole world that does ads and broadcasting needs to be made aware of what they are. There are some simple requirements on them to accept the forms that are filed with us. Then the Independent Expenditure Committee must provide us with a copy, which we must post and keep up for 5 years, which is an interesting number since the cycle is 2 or 4 in this particular state. And so we're trying to work through a definition of online platform, a definition of what would actually constitute the ad. It says machine readable in the bill itself, which, well, for me, I found a lot of definitions of what that meant. And then in addition, we're being sued on accessibility, so we would need to make those accessible as they went up. So it's unclear to us.
If the initial ad itself is not accessible, would we have to
Well,
do the modifications
Well, the
to
question
make it
is,
accessible?
the question is, do we require that the IEs provide them to us in an accessible format? And then still, we're going to need staff to run a check to make sure that they are in the 24-hour cycle, to make sure that when they go up, they are accessible, and there's no money given to us for this particular project. And the effective date, the regulations have to be effective within 120 days, which are virtually today, because they go out for public comment for 60 days. And then 30 days after the effective date, the system has to be up and running. So it is a handful of things, a big handful, that we have to get our minds around. Not to mention, it's in the middle of the state and local primary filing petition section that all this becomes effective.
Where council's doing all that
July.
work.
It's about 120
So
days.
in the timeline, we would not need to adopt emergency regulations at the next meeting.
Well,
No, in fact, I'm sorry.
but
want me to-
no, I mean, we've worked through the timelines, Brian particularly, and Nick, and there is a path that we could get it done in the regular process, and then if we fell behind, we could adopt an emergency regulation as a placeholder until the comments were in and the original regulation was deemed done or finally adopted by you.
One of the issues here is we do not want to be early, and obviously we don't want to be late. We want to
Right.
be just on time, because one of the unique things about this legislation is that its effective date is triggered to the effective date of the regulation. And we would want to take as much time as we can, because we have the IT issue of having the system up and ready, and that system has to be up and ready within 30 days after the regulations are promulgated, and we're given 120 days to promulgate the regulation. So in an ideal world, we would promulgate the regulation on or about the 120th day, so that we would end up with a total of 150 days from when the bill is signed in order to put the whole system up and running and being functional. If we got ahead of ourselves in promulgating the regulation, we would be cutting our time back. But the good news is, as Kim said, is that we are able to, if we put a draft out there for people to comment on, if we end up needing to do revisions, we have confirmed with people who do this every day that even after starting the regular process, we could intervene with an emergency that could take effect on the right day, and then continue with the republished republication process for final adoption, which could then extend out an additional 3 months or even longer if necessary.
Does this apply to only ads with the candidate's name or related directly to the candidate? Or how about
Sure.
issues directly related to a particular candidate?
The standards related to the timeframes did not change. So what this does is it normally, in order to be an independent expenditure, it has to reach 500 or more general public audience. With respect to digital ads, it shrank the reach down to 50. And what it also did is it is requiring the weekly filing with us of reports for any purchase of digital ads that's more than $500. So for other IEs, it's $5,000 on the weekly. For this, it's only $500, and the
And
bill
then
does.
24 hours, it apply. The 500 kicks in as well.
I think actually only the 24-hour period did change, but they put the $5,000 expenditure in the 24-hour report now. Because under the current law, originally when the legislature did this, they had 5,000 and 1,000. 5,000 expenditure and 1,000 contribution reported. The last time they amended the law, they changed it so that in the 24-hour period, there was only the contribution, $1,000 contribution to an IE being reported. They put the $5,000 back in the 24-hour reporting as well, but that only applies within 30 days of the election.
For an expenditure.
For an expenditure, yes, excuse me. So actually, it makes a lot of changes throughout the IE statute that are just pretty rudimentary changes to the regulation, and then having a plan to inform the regulated community about what the new rules are. And Kim has very aptly described the complexities associated with the new parts with the digital ads and putting up an online database of those. I would underscore what she sort of mentioned as sort of my mantra is that there's some tension in the definition because it talks about putting them up in a machine-readable format. And by its nature, images and videos and audio recordings are not able to be machine-readable. I'm not sure that the legislature had intended that the actual ad be made available as much as they wanted a disclosure of that the ad was made, and you could pair the money to the ad itself. Normally with political communications that are digital or audio under the current legal framework, when they're filed post-election, we take scripts for audio and visual communications.
Right, and also keeping in mind that all of these things would have been disclosed anyway.
But this speeds it up.
Okay, so the goal here is that when you get the weekly report from this independent committee showing its expenditures, you can connect those expenditures to a specific set of ads that were put up by this
Right, but the
committee?
ads themselves are all required to have attribution, so when you read the ad, you know what committee did it.
But yes, that is true.
Trying to understand maybe what issue this is trying to address. What's the problem this is trying to fix?
The database applies to digital and online ads,
Right.
and so for reasons that the legislature obviously desired more transparency and disclosure in that particular area. I'm purely guessing because there was no memo that came out with this, so there is a dearth of legislative history. But I think what we're hearing in terms of the Facebook issues and sort of the concerns about essentially anonymous or untrackable spending in some of these platforms, apparently the legislature believes creates unique issues that require additional disclosure.
But it's only applicable to the independent expenditure committees, not a political committee.
Okay.
So that's where we are on that.
So to repeat, the timeline is that they'll be presented with a draft of the regulations at the next meeting, which is in the first week of May, as I recall.
That is
May
our
3rd.
goal, yes.
And then, but we will not adopt them, we're not intending to adopt them as emergency regulations at that time, that they'll be,
Right, not at that time.
they'll be set for publication, and then public comments can be submitted, but
And if we're running out of time, we'll have to adopt the emergency regulation to take effect to trigger the 30-day
and
database.
what is the deadline for adopting that
It's
emergency regulation?
It's
Or-
120 days from the effective date of the legislation, and I don't think we actually know
Yeah, we don't
the
know.
exact
LRS
effective
didn't
date.
show an update to
So
the
we're not
chapter
signed the
yet.
bill yet.
What day is the chapter? Would be day one.
It's part of the appropriate.
It's a
actually-
standalone. It's
right.
an Article,
Okay.
it's an Article 7
Oh,
bill.
So if he delays the signature, that
When no
works too.
budget has a chapter number yet, so
Maybe he won't sign it.
it usually
I'm-
takes them a
I'm-
while to
I'm
update
sure he will
LRS,
sign
but
it.
This was one of the
Hope
governor's,
springs eternal on this side of the table.
it was one of the governor's initiatives,
Hope
so.
springs
well,
eternal.
it's not a standalone. There are other Article 7 things mixed in there.
It's part JJJ. So there's a lot of other
So
things.
I'm sure
that are
some
in
other
there.
part that I haven't read is important to somebody also. We focused on the two, because also when there's the judges.
Signed April 1st. We'll find it.
So that's,
It wasn't transmitted to them till the 3rd. Second or third, Monday.
Second.
It wasn't transmitted till Monday.
so that's where the council's office is.
All right, that's good then. So
Do
if
you have any
people
bad-
want to influence the draft, they should send you suggestions.
Yeah, I could say that out loud, I suppose. We should,
Mail us.
some already have, some have mailed us a letter. Certainly Brian and I and Nick would certainly listen to anyone before the draft goes out, once the draft goes out, at any time. We'd be willing.
Well, you have very limited time in the next month. So the preference would be for people to send you written or
Right, or
comments.
email them, or
Right.
they all know how to get us.
Writing is preference. So, I mean, something in writing.
Okay.
That's it.
Anything else from the council's office? No? Any other questions? Okay. Then we'll move on to election operations. Tom Conley and Brendan Lavalla.
Thank you, Commissioner. So we've been doing some work for all the elections this year. For the April 24th special, we certified the list of candidates. As Kim had mentioned before, with the new regulations on special federal voters, we provided guidance to all of the county boards regarding how to treat the voters. We also ensured that for the counties that were involved in the special election, that those voters were coded away in the system so that they were able to utilize the electronic transmission method that we have for UACAPA voters. So we made sure that the counties that were involved were able to do that with Nice Voter. We're also working with OCA to stick at the list of election day judges for that election. The June 26th primary, we have received additional nominations. Since the four, we've received 3 additional ones. We received 4 report at the last meeting. Obviously, also some additional documentation to support those things. And obviously, we have the filing period next week, so we've been kind of gearing up for that, so that we're ready to go to receive those petitions and turn around all that information. For the September 13th, we've calculated the signature numbers based on the April 1st enrollments that were just run this past weekend. And we've also been working with, as Kim had mentioned, the election had, for the primary, changed from the 11th to the 13th, so we had worked with, at least, at the very least, the Federal Voting Assistance Program to update some of their information that they communicate to the military and overseas voters, to let them know that some of the deadlines have changed for that. And then for the general, we did prepare also earlier last month the statewide certification that goes out just to let all the county boards know the various offices that are to be filled with the general. Bob had mentioned the 2 vacancies that we recently certified for the congressional district and for also the assembly. There is something later on in the agenda about ballot access rulings that cover a nomination document that had come in and also a hearing that was held regarding the 102nd Assembly District. Under voting machines, we are continuing to work on the certification process for the Dominion ImageCast Evolution device, which is a replacement of their existing ballot marking device. Cybersecurity, I know Bob and Todd covered a bunch of cybersecurity. We are continuing to work with other units in the Department of Homeland Security on developing our plan for 6 tabletop cybersecurity preparedness exercises that we're going to hold across the state. That is moving along. We are anticipating, I believe, our first one to happen sometime later this month. We have been participating in the calls on the cybersecurity planning and the spending that was mentioned with regard to the funds that are in the budget, and also our plan for spending some of the federal funds. And last week, John, Cheryl, and I attended there was a Train the Trainer conference at the Belfer Center at Harvard University in Cambridge, Massachusetts, that focused on cybersecurity preparedness, and also tried to help us figure out how to plan or train the trainer so that we could kind of plan those things internally and possibly send some of that information along to the counties. With regard to accessibility, I had scheduled some additional trainings for staff, both in just basic accessibility so that everyone kind of improve their ability in that regard, but also I had asked all the units to select a small number of staff who would kind of be responsible for some of the content coming out of that unit, and we provided them with additional security on accessibility in Microsoft Word and Excel, and also Adobe Acrobat. And we've been, obviously, with regard to the ESIN, we have been working with IT and PIO and council on doing what we can to help either remediate some of the content that's on the website or make tweaks to the website itself. And then there's some miscellaneous stuff. We are continuing to work with IT on the new CAPA system. The ops staff have provided some EMS training to Madison County. We've been working on the shoebox extensions, and the shoebox is a funding program for the counties to get reimbursed, and we just have to do some paperwork every year to extend those contracts, so we've been working on processing that. And I believe that's all I have now. Brendan?
Well, I'll read the one thing that's not on the paper. Mark Lindemann and I finally got in touch with each other, and we have a date planned for meeting up on in 2 weeks, I believe, the 18th.
Great, I'm glad to hear that, because that will allow you to continue to evaluate alternatives for improving the efficiency of the New York audit process.
I'm sorry, who's Mark Linderman?
He's, I guess, advocate, maybe the word or something. He's interested in risk limiting audits, so he's requested to come up and meet with Tom and I. And
he's a professor at Columbia University.
Right.
Okay, sorry.
In computer science. And then ballot usability issues.
Yeah, I mentioned that at the last meeting, and I left it off
Right.
on this one only because we've been working on a couple other things, so I didn't have anything new to report, but we are continuing to engage the Center for Civic Design to work on the usability of a number of things, including obviously the ballots are primarily, but looking at other stuff as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Any questions? Okay. Then we will move on to NVRA PIO, John Conklin and Cheryl Kauser.
Thank you, Commissioner. The PIO office, or the Public Information Office, has been busy since the last meeting. Routine questions about the special elections, petitions for Congress and the state legislature, the federal budget, the state budget, the cybersecurity issues, a lot of the routine questions from the press and the general public. I didn't hear Tom mention it, but the three of he and I and Cheryl attended a tabletop exercise training conference at the Belfer Center at Harvard University last week, which was very useful for us moving forward as we plan to do some of those things for the counties here in New York. The unit also participated in the monthly ECA call in March. We continue to be in all the meetings on the discussions of what to do with the cybersecurity money and the planning on how to address those issues for our board. The unit processed 97 FOIL requests in the month of March. We continue to be involved in certain preparation of materials for the lawsuits with the counsel's office. The 2017 annual report is nearing completion. I'm waiting for 3 units to provide their sections, and then we should have that.
What 3 units?
Enforcement, council compliance, and election ops.
We're very close.
We're
down to
closer.
one number.
Yeah, we are close.
We're closer.
Okay, it's a race, that's fine.
Well, and I would also say that if they're not, well,
Ours will be to him by the end of the day. We had one number we had to track down.
and ops,
Send it now.
and ops.
I think that Brendan and I just have to kind of go over the numbers, but I think content-wise, it's all put together, so we will try to beat council today.
And enforcement,
Mine is written, it just needs to be reviewed.
so we should be ready to publish next month, by next month.
That sounds like that's true.
Well, we have to then make it screen readable, so that
Well,
might
that,
take.
I wonder if
I
the
don't-
PIO's portion is done.
the PIO portion and NVRA are done. Are done. The only thing that PIO hasn't done is the cover letter at the
See?
beginning of the report.
See?
Well,
It's like one number.
but that actually is executive section, but I end up doing it, so
He does a fine job.
there you go, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so The Election Commissioners Association has decided they're going to take back the winter conference meeting. So the State Board was making preparations for next year to do that, so we don't have to do that. For the website, we received 5 candidate websites for the April 24th special election. They've been posted on the website. We have up for public comment and final adoption the emergency regulation for Part 6215, which was in relation to publishing the candidate websites for certain offices. The webcast and the transcript for the March 1st meeting is up, and we've published additional documents related to the June 26th federal primary. And lastly, the NVRA unit visited the Schenectady board for a nice road review. So do you have anything to add, Cheryl?
No, that was very good. I think maybe just the April enrollments were
Oh,
put
that's
up.
true. That's correct. So the April 1st enrollments have been published and they are on the website. That's the ones officially required by the statute each year.
Okay, that it? All right, any questions? Okay, thank you. And we will now move on to ITU. Bill Cross.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'll start with projects in terms of Campus Vitus. Resources, it's always an issue. We do remain on track for the current development schedule. But as I continue to report, we have difficulty in filling positions and retaining qualified people. We're still looking to fill multiple permanent or state positions related to the project. But in order to remain on schedule, as well as address some of the possible additional scope related to like the online ads, we know it will have some impact. We don't have all the details in terms of system requirements yet. Nevertheless, we are looking into what we may need to supplement in terms of contractor staff to address the lack of filling of permanent positions and expansion of scope. But we don't have details yet in terms of the full online ad ramifications.
The lack of filling the permanent positions, is that because you have not found the personnel or because of clearance by other agencies?
A little of both. Our postings have had little response. The response we have received, we did not find qualified candidates through that process. We are also investigating moving forward with canvassing state exam lists, civil service lists. There was a delay there because the state just did a new round of testing for IT positions and the new list was not out yet. What was on the old list would not, remaining after several years, would probably not be qualified candidates at that point anyways. So now that the new lists are out, we are canvassing those as well. So there's a variety of factors that go into not being able to fill those positions. We're hopeful that the new list will provide new blood. So
How many positions are you talking about?
we currently have 2 developer positions for Campus Vitus, 2 different grade levels, and 1 network support position.
What kind of exam did I have to take to get on the list?
Depending on the grade level, there's a
Written exam?
There's a portion, they've changed it recently over the years. It was originally a written exam. There's a basic qualification for entry-level positions now that you must meet certain criteria for college credits or experience. And then it actually ends up being a long skill set survey they fill out based on experience, education, credits, certifications. And what we do is we essentially get that same questionnaire, we list out our requirements, and they will do a match.
How do those qualifications, requirements, duties, and so on compare to the private sector and the payment in the private sector?
The duties and skill sets are the same you would see in the private sector.
How about the pay?
The pay is not.
What?
Civil service, civil service for IT positions, there's not a realistic mechanism to bring people in at higher levels. Their levels of what you consider grade 14 or 18 is what they can have for open competitive to allow someone from the outside to join. There's lists internal for promotional once you're in, but you really have to start at entry level and bring someone in, and that's the only mechanism the state provides us with
Do
via
you think
the
that
civil
has some
service.
effect on why you're not getting people?
It does have an effect on that, because private sector, civil service has not maintained salaries or provided a mechanism to bring people in at what's competitive.
Totally unrealistic.
But
The
Well,
private sector is crying for these kinds of people. They're paying higher salaries. There's no way you can compete at this level. Unless you have someone very dedicated, who wants to do public service, but it's not gonna work.
and we try multiple paths to bring some outside through the civil service, but since we also post internally for people who would like to take laterals from other agencies and either escape where they are or look at something
Yeah, but
different.
that
So we
inhibits the other agency.
It does.
And that's what's happened to us.
But
We've
that's how
been,
I'm here. So
we've both benefited and not benefited by that.
I come over as a lateral.
Been
so.
there, done that.
The state did look to identify a certain number of positions in the whole budget that would allow agencies to go when they can't fill, that would allow us to go out into a competitive, but I haven't heard if that passed. They've discussed it 2 budget
Not with
cycles.
more money.
That would allow us to go outside of the traditional
Entry level.
entry
Oh,
level.
bring him in at higher.
But both people who support it and oppose it, so it hasn't made it in. But they've
It's a
seriously
real-
looked
it's
at
a
it,
real problem
doing
with
something.
Every government.
So we continue to explore every avenue we have.
Their answer is H-bits to everything, which is even more expensive because you have to pay the employee plus the company to come in, but they still, they take the knowledge with them when they leave. And they're very task-specific to come in, so.
So the HBIS process provides us to hire kind of raw talent. But we essentially, as Bob said, we pay about double, almost double for those people as we would with a permanent employee. And it's temporary, so they do.
It's not
really
only
well.
temporary, you don't have the flexibility with that employee. You can't just say, we want you here now, we want you there now, because you've hired them for a specific purpose.
There's a specific skill set and specific tasks and
Right.
specialized, yeah.
We have had to
Even-
use them
even
in an
them.
emergency,
No, but I'm telling you,
right?
someone should deal with this.
I agree with you.
There's no argument from this. So we're trying, but in interest of time, and we do recognize there's going to be probably some expansive scope both for the new system with the online ads. Will certainly add to our work as not to push the date out, and also to deal with whatever stopgap measure we have in terms of a solution, because the new system won't be ready in time.
Well, we have
We're
30
going to
days.
contract.
We have 30 days, that's plenty of
Oh,
time.
right, okay.
Well, I have to say, this is the third budget in 4 years. Section of law with a deadline semi like this. This is probably the larger ad from a technology point of view and a regulation point of view than we've had. But you know, it's the worst time of year for election administrators to be taking on new work because it's when we're busiest for ballot access and busiest for campaign finance reports to be filed, and onboarding new treasurers for new campaigns that are just beginning. It's the worst of the worst to onboard new responsibility when you're already, you know, I think there may be technology money that we can access, but there's no staff money to access. So that kind of makes it hard to have these kinds of things in a budget cycle without people to implement them.
And it's not just strictly people, depending on how this legislation's interpreted. It may be a system or an infrastructure component, something we need that we don't have now to capture and publish some of this information. And we don't have something right now that's scalable, so it might be some technology, new technology that needs to be implemented. So it's not strictly just people resources.
It's all of it.
The total number of slots authorized for your unit is how many?
There's 12 permanent IT staff.
So 3 out of 12 are vacant now.
Yeah. So another development, like I said, we do continue on track in terms of EFS development, ballot access, data conversion. We also continue our outreach. We've finished the survey of counties to capture data exchange opportunities for the county boards. We had a Capacify steering committee to go over those results and start to define some internal requirements of what the new system will do and what those capabilities will look like. So that feedback from the counties is instrumental in designing the functionality of the new system, so we really appreciate their feedback on that area. Nice Voter. As reported last month, we're nearing completion of the Nice Voter upgrade. We did joke last month that it was going to be done in March, and we were already in March. We are very close, but final testing revealed several issues that just are not ready for prime time yet, particularly work related to work performed by a previous vendor that we're now trying to retrofit and get working. We are making progress, although it was unexpected in the last stretch. We're working through these. We'll set a new go-live date based on, of course, that progress and, at this point, the election calendar with the special coming up and working around dates that we have to. But we are very close on that. The move rewrite is also progressing in development. Resources have shifted a bit this past month on the Nice Voter implementation because there is overlap of we don't have we have what we have for resources, so there was a shift this past month, but progress is continuing development and move. And we're still working with the State Office of IT Services on the data center relocation that they're requiring us to do. We have pushed off to the extent possible, knowing that at the completion of the Nice Voter project, we will have a lot less to move than we would if we did it in the middle or currently. So they've backed off a bit from pushing on a date to occur, but we are still working on several aspects of planning for that, and our communications vendors and several other vendors for that move and that relocation. I anticipate that it will probably happen shortly, immediately, right after Nice Voter implementation towards the end of this month or the beginning of May. Security, I think, has been covered by several people so far, so that I'll just throw in that the IT unit continues to work with the rest of BOE in planning and implementation of the security initiatives for both the agency and the county and the new budgets and the HAVA funds. IT is also working with Ops and PIO and development of cybersecurity tabletop exercises in conjunction with DHS to be held. We formally applied, excuse me, we have now formally applied to DHS to have them do a full risk assessment of our systems. And we've applied and we're filling out the details of what that assessment engagement will look like, what systems will be scanned, what they'll be looking for, and things like that. BOE has also been invited to speak at Nice GLITA, which is the New York State Local Government IT Directors Association. It is a mouthful. Spring conference in early May on the topic of election security. So we had a call with that organization's president and vice president to talk about some of the content that for a potential presentation with them, and we'll probably have a follow-up call with them. We frequently reach out to county boards and relay security information on a regular basis. Reaching county IT people has been a little more problematic, even though we do make the efforts possible. So this avenue through them, the communications channel, is kind of jumped at the opportunity to be able to speak at their conference, establish a better relationship with them. Website analytics is about normal for our main website, averaging about 200,000 page views a month. Traffic to the voter lookup site slightly bumped up to about 98,000 page views, but otherwise pretty normal for this time of year. That's all I have.
Okay. Any questions of Bill? Okay, thank you. And our last unit, enforcement unit, Risa Sugarman.
I have no report, Commissioner.
Are there any questions for Risa? All right, then we will go on to old business.
I would just ask for to meet with the commissioners only in an executive session for a short.
After the meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's it.
Is it a personnel
No,
or?
just for,
It's a confidential matter though?
yes.
Okay. Is that okay with the commissioners, or how do you feel about that?
The open meetings law requires that it be one of the categories that authorizes an executive session. So which
It's
category?
about personnel.
Personnel then.
Okay.
Okay. All right, then we'll go on to old business. Is there any old business to come up before the board?
Well, we have the regulation.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's under old business, right, yeah. So the regulation that we have here is the automated audit tool regulation that's been out there for
Procedure.
a couple of months, I believe, at least, for comment, and I think it's now coming back to us for
It's not
final
the regular,
adoption.
it's
No,
the,
this is to authorize the procedures,
This is just the
which
procedure.
were circulated a couple of days after our last meeting, and I have reviewed the procedures. I want to point out to again publicly reprimand the certification unit for accepting documents from vendors with confidential designations on them that do not comply with our rules. I've raised this issue repeatedly at prior meetings, and the current director and deputy director of the operations unit were not supervising the office at the time those procedures were submitted, so they are not personally at fault. But we've gotten to the point now where I've raised the issue so many times that our regulation requires that the procedures be publicly available. And it's an important transparency issue, and that as soon as a vendor submits a document on it, the certification unit should be reviewing the document to see if there is a confidential designation on it that does not comply with our regulation, and immediately notify the vendor that the submission is improper. And so I want to make a point of that again, that it shouldn't reach the commissioner level for me to have to read the document and see that there's an improper confidentiality designation on it. In the case of Clear Ballot, they designated as confidential documents that anybody could Google and get off the Colorado Board of Elections website. So the fact that they had designated the documents confidential is just plain ridiculous. And I might add that Colorado gives a good example that in Colorado the procedures are easily available because they can be Googled, and I would ask that operations consider putting up these procedures as well as the procedures for the image cast and DS 200s to be publicly available as many other states make them available. So with that digression, these procedures are fine, and I move their adoption.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So they are adopted. Is there anything else we have to do in this context to make the clear ballot available to our counties for audit purposes?
Well, I mean, the system itself is already available to them. This simply authorizes the use of their tool for the purposes of an automated audit.
Is there anything else we have to do then to make that?
We'll let them know that
We have to go
what
into
happened here
procedure.
today.
Okay, so they can now start to use these tools for their audit purposes in the
Yep.
upcoming election. Okay. All right, any other old business to come before us? Okay, then we will move on to new business. Under new business, we have an item of some ballot access rulings. We have a objection from the 102nd Assembly District, and we also have a prima facie ruling on the U.S. Senate seat. So does someone want to explain these?
Well, we have draft determinations.
We do. I didn't know if anybody wanted to speak to this, or if they just wanted to.
If there's somebody from the public who wants to address us, otherwise I just move the draft determinations.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And it's adopted as presented. That is that, and then we have another piece of business, and these are enforcement regulations, part 6203. And these are proposed regulations regarding the enforcement unit.
So it's my understanding that the staff has worked together and taken comments from the commissioners and synthesized them, and we'll publish them for comments, and we'll carefully review comments that people submit.
Yeah, I think I just like to, before we vote, just mention, I think this is an effort by this board to give further substance to the enforcement unit, which was created here about 3 years ago now, a little over 3 years ago, I believe. It's been in operation. I think we've seen how the enforcement unit has operated for those last 3+ years. I think these regulations are an effort to try to put into some more definitive way how the unit should function within the agency. So I think this is a good opportunity for us to do that, and I think we'll put them out there, as you said, for public comment, and we'll see what happens, and then ultimately we'll decide how to go forward.
Commissioner, I would just like to say that these were provided to me yesterday at about 1 o'clock, less than 24 hours before this meeting. They were drafted in secret. I did not know anything about them. And I will be reviewing them, and will be issuing a public comment during that public comment period.
That's fine. They expect it, so. And anyone else that will want to comment, of course, is welcome to do so. So I would entertain a motion to adopt, to put these out for public comment. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so they are adopted to be put out for public comment, and we'll see what happens after that. I have no other business to come before the board today, unless anybody else wants to bring anything up.
No, I just moved
We've
over
already-
to executive session.
We've already set our next board meeting date, which I believe is May 3rd, so that's already been set. We don't need to do that here.
And
So
we'll have to come up based on their estimate of 120 days, so we can at least schedule the one after May 3rd.
Yeah.
Try and get that to you
Yes.
to
Yes.
make sure your calendars are clear.
Yes, okay. You'll let us know on that. In that case, if there's no other business, I would entertain a motion to go into executive session to discuss a personnel matter. I'm sorry, is there a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Adopted. So we'll go into executive session. We will not, I anticipate, come back into public session for anyone who's here for that purpose.
Thank you, Commissioner.
So, thank you.